Hello viewers, welcome once again to another edition of our literary program. We are today in a beautiful old home of Shillong, as you can see the background of it. Well, because I am in the midst of a scholar. He is a very well-read and he has written so much about his own people, about his own culture. Yes, I am in the midst of Dr. Auswyn Japang. He is currently the assistant professor in St. Anthony's College in the Department of English. Well, Dr. Auswyn has had a lot of interest in folk tradition, in folk culture, in beliefs, in the old customs, traditions, etc. In fact, he calls himself as a folklorist. Well, recently he has also been awarded with a very prestigious fellowship called the Samvaad Fellowship, and this was a competition that was held, and out of the 316 applicants, well, a few of them were chosen and he is one of them. And yes, it was presented to him by the Tata Steel Foundation. Apart from that, he has written many books. He has co-authored books as well. And what caught my attention is the fact that he has even contributed and written children's books. Now, children have always find a lot of interest in folk stories because these stories takes their imaginations. So, and he has written these two books called The Tunes of Kongtong and also Let's Dance with Ainam. So, as you can understand that this conversation today is going to be very deep and very interesting because I am in the midst of Dr. Auswyn, as I said in the beginning, very well read and has written so much about his own people and culture. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Auswyn. It's a pleasure to come to your house today and be on a one-on-one in our literary program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mashmi. Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. You know, I can see all these books that are, so many of them. And before this conversation began officially for our viewers, you said that you have written so much, you have co-authored also, etc., etc. Let's go down a little bit, because today you are writing, today you are absolutely into your field, that is literature, etc. But I'm sure it wasn't always like that. It grew with time. So tell us, how did it grow with time?
Well, in fact, I'm very happy with that question because it gets me to go back to the time when I was very ignorant about my own culture, in fact. Right. Ever since I was a school student as well, I never took Khasi. I thought it was somewhat inferior to English. I thought that if you're good in English, you would have more prospects. And the same continued until I reached my degree. But things changed when I pursued my master's. This was from the English and Foreign Languages University at Hyderabad, where I had my interaction with a great mentor of mine, a teacher of mine, called Professor D. Venkat Rao. He changed my perspective when he asked me about my culture and I did not know. That sense of shame that I did not know about my own enough made me to start my reading, I became deeply reflective, but I started to read as well, to have at least answers for him by the next class. But then, in the course of these 2 years while I was pursuing my master's, I realized that there was so much that can still be done. In fact, he encouraged me to keep on working on these things, to keep on asking questions, because he believed that there are still many things that have not been documented, have not been archived properly in the form of which he called surrogate bodies or archives. He says, you can do a lot and I would like you to be my scholar as well in the years to come. Unfortunately, that never happened because there was no seats available at that time, and I decided to pursue folkloristics. It is there that I was able to further immerse myself into understanding my culture further. And with time, I realized that there was also this big gap when it comes to the amount of material available, especially for young children. That's the reason why I was also ignorant when I was a child, because there was hardly materials enough that will excite me to read, that will make me interested in my own culture, that will make me to invest my time. So that's where my journey as an academician then takes on the turn of writing for children as well. But for that also, I'm also grateful to many other people and organizations like the Sauromandala Foundation from the Shillong base itself that eventually allowed me to venture into this area, because again, I did not have any expertise in this area prior to meeting them. So that's how, in brief,
it just
yes,
began.
Yes, yes.
I know it is. You just spoke so well right in the beginning, and it is so true that I think most of the children from here have always had that kind of a mindset that taking up their own MIL is not as nice or not as something to be proud of than taking alternative English. But today that has changed because a lot of parents are encouraging children to take up their own language and take it up because there is a lot of scope also. Now coming back to what you have just said, that it is also a fact that we have grew up on the diet of fairy tales such as Alice in Wonderland and Rapunzel and I mean, so many such fairy tales.
Right.
But now there are tales that are being written based on the Khasi's myths and legends and oral traditions, etc. And as I said, that you have come up, in fact, you've written these two books, The Tunes of Kong Thong and Let's Dance with Aina. Let's come down to these. What are these two little storybooks which are full of illustrations, also colorful illustrations, which will excite the children in any case? What are these two books all about?
Well, these two books are an outcome of a project that Saramandala Foundation, initiated. That is to allow contextual material to exist in the state of Meghalaya, where they take stories from the Khasi, Jaintia and the Garo Hills for the children of this very state itself. I met this group of people in Nartyang when there was a seminar happening that was organized by MLCO. They approached me and they talked about how we could create material for young people, because if we are to really bring about a change in the way we think, it has to start through children. I was very taken by this approach that they were having. And eventually, after having a few meetings, I finally got on board and became one of their authors as well, and of course translated quite a couple of their works by other writers as well. And I realized that this was the gap that was missing.
Right.
Children nowadays are very different from my time because they love things that are more visually appealing.
Yeah.
And so illustrated books are what we actually need right now. There is hardly any. And like you said correctly, most of us, of my generation especially, grew up on the appetite of having these Western fairy tales and narratives being fed to us through the TV and also in the forms of books. But we hardly have any of our own. And even if we did, because I remember growing up, there were some of these graphic novels. They were a bit advanced for my age. They don't exist now, but at the moment, there's hardly any material that will make children want to read, to know more about themselves, be proud of themselves. And this is one of the reasons why these two books came out. Unfortunately, I was not able to contribute more to Saramandala Foundation and its project. I could only come up with two books, but these two books in themselves have allowed me to also take up what you've mentioned earlier, the Samvaad Fellowship, because it will work on that same line as well. So yes, that's how.
Of course, I'll make you read in a little while from one of the stories, perhaps, what you have written. Now, coming back to this fellowship that you have, just received, congratulations firstly, because you are one of the few, I think 7 or 6 of you who were chosen?
There are just 7 of us.
7 of you who were chosen, and you happen to be out of the 316 applications that went. It was a competition. So what did you apply? Like you wrote something? I mean, and then?
Yes,
it was based on that?
There were 2 things that were happening side by side. One was that in the month of August, there were these calls, in fact, from June, July to August, there were these 2 calls for proposals. One was from the Chief Minister's Research Grant from our state itself. So while applying for both the Samvaad Fellowship and the CMRG, I was fortunately selected for both. And it so happens that while the work for CMRG is almost done, the work for Tata was yet to begin, and I thought, why not give it a try? My pitch was on documenting clan narratives. You see, I believe that they are vanishing simply because we do not have anthologies, we do not have materials that has properly documented them. You see, we have many Senkur, we have many, recently even the Federation of Clan Elders was formed, but documentation of these clan narratives, which almost all clans have not been done thoroughly. I thought this was a very important area that needs documentation right now. I am full aware that there are only 2 books, one in the 90s and the other one in 2016 that came up. both by Spitan Karakor and the other by Yarrington Kharkongor, that they have tried to document, but not in a manner that, that stories are also preserved in a manner which will serve to the benefit of the clans and the people, which constitutes the Hinyotrap as well. So this was the idea which I pitched to Tata Samvaad. What is interesting with this is that during the pitch, I also informed them that an anthology will be scholastic in nature, it will be academic by nature. It will be for a more mature audience, but that's not only my target group, because I realize over the years that children, especially if they are removed from their own culture, they will be least bothered about this material. What will they use this material for? So the second pitch was that I will create 50 children narratives, because the target here is to document 50 clan narratives first. So 50 children literature, and they will be presented in a manner that is not only applicable to our context, our region. That means they will be written in Khasi, but it'll also be written in the two official languages of our country, English and Hindi. So that way it'll have a greater circulation, and I believe that only by having such can we truly respect our own identity and our own culture. But at the same time, others also could be more appreciative and understand the diversity that we have through the clan narratives as well. So that's how I pitched with Tata Foundation, and by the way, it was a very ambitious one, because so far this is the 11th iteration of the Samvaad. They have always focused on one output. This is the first time they've approved for 3 outputs. One being the anthology, second being 50 children narratives, and the third being a translation of all of those 50 narratives. So it's quite ambitious, and we are well, for some reason they believed in my pitch, and they believed that I felt deeply about it, I felt strongly about it, and I'm motivated to complete it within the specific time span that they have given me. So we are now currently in talks with the budget and so on and so forth, and we will start soon. So
amazing, amazing. 50 of them, and that also in multiple languages. This is an amazing work indeed. It is amazing, I mean.
For that, I must also again credit Saramandala Foundation, because it was through them, by writing on the tunes of Kongthong and Let's Dance with Ainam, that I learned how to work about these things and to come up with these things. So I give credit to them. Yes. Yeah,
all the very best. I'm sure once they come out. I mean, as you said, culture. There should always be an exchange of culture, right? I mean, books are there for everybody to read. It doesn't matter whose stories we are reading, right? I mean, stories are stories, and as long as the language is understood, and you said that it will be now in 2 other languages also. So all the very best for this.
Thank you.
And looking forward to that also. I'm sure many children who are watching this program should look forward to that. What is the time frame that you have to complete it?
Well, usually the time frame is 1 year. However, dealing with the corpus of materials, it might take a little further than that, but it will be done within a short span of time.
All right. I'm sure they found it very, very interesting, and that's why you are one of them,
Yes.
And now talking about, the vanishing oral stories, narratives, how deeply do you feel? Because it is a fact that, children of today, they do read, but they read in bits and pieces. And that is why I think, Dr. Austin, you have realized that most of our reading materials, even if we read from the electronic medium, it is written there 2 minutes read, 3 minutes read. And I wonder why those minutes are mentioned. Is our attention span only limited to those minutes? So are we therefore losing out on reading habits also, because we have maybe our mind is filled with other activities, and therefore it is a worrying sign also?
What you're saying is absolutely correct. In fact, it is a very deeply worrying aspect of this generation, that we are being too distracted. There's too much for us to consume, and mostly it comes in the form of social media, output, videos, and they all tend to address our senses to a point that we need fast information. We don't want to be detailed any longer. But the thing is, if we are really concerned, in order to do something about this, it is only through children. We have to change their habits. For grown-ups, it becomes difficult. When a habit is formed, it's very difficult. Now, that's the reason why I decided to, while I write mostly academic papers, I now start to go into creative writing and mostly children literature, because this is a niche area, at least in our state. there's hardly material in this particular area. And I've also received few comments from parents who still have children in their households saying that we need more of this because my daughter or my son asked me to read this at least once or twice, sometimes every day of the week, and I need more of these books. Please write more. This was in the Meghalayan Age store when we relaunched the Tunes of Kong Thong through Meghalaya Tourism. Because children now, because of the visuals, they find these stories more interesting. They spend more time.
Absolutely. And here comes the role of the parents also, I guess.
Of course.
They must encourage their children to read. They must, I think, present during birthdays, etc., a book for the children. Our time, I think it was more that, and we used to love collecting. Now it is more of other gadgets and tools, that is being given. I'm not saying those are bad, but then books also should be a part.
Should be a part. And that's why books need to be interesting.
Yes, and that's how we can bring back the reading habits in children, starting from them all over again. Now, coming back to your other writings that you've also co-authored, what was those all about?
This was when I started to venture into creative writing with a book called People Called Shillong.
Okay.
I contributed just 2 stories there. In fact, I've never gone into creative writing because I never thought I was good enough to write. I could write academic papers relatively well, but when it comes to creative writing, I've always felt a sense of insecurity.
Okay.
Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe my readers will not be, will not love the kind of work that I will be doing, because I feel my English is sometimes too simple as well. But for some reason, those who have read at least these 2 stories from there, especially one notable while eating a plate of jado, enjoyed the story, and he said that you are a very good writer. But for some reason, I've always continued to self-doubt even that comment, because I thought that maybe it's because it is too simple. Now I realize that simplicity is key.
Absolutely.
That's why children's literature is of the utmost importance. Apart from that, most of my writing are in the academic, of the academic nature. And in doing so as well, I've realized through my own guide, Professor Desmond Karmaplang, where the creative can enter the academic. It needs not, your academic writing need not always be so blunt, so coarse with data, that it is replete of the beauty of storytelling. So most of my papers also tends to start in the form of a narrative. Sometimes it's conversational style, sometimes it's more of people talking or people visiting certain places and then realizing certain aspects where they didn't pick up. So there's one where I trace...
So one can relate to them, right?
Yes, yes.
It is almost like me, if I pick up that book, I will find myself. And that's how a beautiful story is all about.
Yes, but at the same time, it is never removed from the academic figure that is also required. So that way I realize that these things must go side by side. And so hopefully I'll be able to do that with the years to come as well.
I'm sure you will be able to do that, because I can see so many of these books that are there on the table where somewhere or the other, of course your academic works are there, but then you've also contributed stories. How about reading something for us right now?
All right. I'll be reading, if you allow me to.
Please.
I'll read first from this one called The Tunes of Kong Thong. Let me inform you that The Tunes of Kong Thong has already reached its 2nd edition.
Wow. It's a sellout, huh?
Yes, it has done quite well. It has also gone to Italy at a Bologna book fair where it was highlighted. Here, in this Tune of Kong Thong, my focus was to talk about this tradition that exists among the Khasi community. And while Kong Thong is known now as a tourism village for its whistling.
Whistling village.
Well, the word whistling as well is always problematic. So in the Tunes of Kong Thong, I made sure that the word whistling was never featured at all. It was never used, and I used the word tune instead. So if I read, it's like this. This is the idea behind the story called Kajingrwa Yaubei. It is tradition in Kong Thong for mothers to compose tunes for their children. The tunes are their unofficial names. Every member of the village has a tune composed by their parents. It is called Jingrwa Yaubei. Everyone has their own unique tune, which is sung by others while calling them, or sung by the person to whom the tune belongs to inform others that they are nearby. The members of the community are said to be able to recognize each other's tunes, making it the preferred method of calling people. But the thing is, while writing this Tunes of Kong Thong, I was also conscious that it is not misleading, because people now tend to think that in Kong Thong all people do is whistle. So even when they converse, they are whistling, which is not true.
No.
It's only their unofficial names that is the tune, that is the divine inspiration of the ancestral mother. So this story was meant not only for young audience, but even for mature audience, because at the end of the day, parents who will first read this before they read to their children will also understand the context of why these tunes are so important to a certain group in a certain community somewhere in Meghalaya. And that way, this misinformation that has also been existing for quite some time now can also be displaced.
So while doing that, what kind of research you had to do? Because this is a misconception that you have actually got rid of.
Yes.
So did you go to the place?
Yes, I stayed at Kong Thong many times, in fact. Kong Thong, although not my area of research per se, my area is more beyond that. It's towards their area. I would often stop at Kong Thong because that's where the road ends. And I'd spend a considerable amount of time. But while writing for this book, another group of researchers through the Saramandala Foundation that I told you also ventured and collected their own material and documented quite a bit. And with their materials that they have and the knowledge that I've gathered over the years, I combined the two and created this material that is both inspired by folklore, but also informed to make sure that people are less misinformed or they misunderstand the culture of Kong Thong as well.
And this is the beauty of oral tradition, isn't it?
Yes.
So many of our myths and legends has been passed orally from generation, and it's so important to hold on to them, because if we don't today, it will be lost forever.
Of course.
And fortunately, people like you who are coming them and preserving them in this form of the books and passing it down to the children who are our future.
Yes.
What else are you planning to read for us?
I'll be reading this, which is more academic in nature.
Right.
This is from a paper that I've submitted, and I will soon be publishing this in the Khasi version as well.
Wonderful.
The paper is called The Pervasiveness of Folklore in the Oral Traditions, Hima Sobar and the Anglo-Khasi War in Context.
Okay.
This is an academic paper that I've submitted a few years back, and I've made sure that many images are also part of this, so that it adds to the dimension of the paper. However, it is the conclusion that I'll be reading. It says this: in conclusion, this study represents a significant contribution to the existing scholarship on the Anglo-Khasi War and provides a foundation for future academic endeavours in this area. By utilizing folkloric techniques and textual interpretation, the study offers a new perspective on a critical event in the region's history, because this is oftentimes oral by nature, highlighting the importance of the oral tradition in preserving and transmitting oral narratives and historical knowledge. Because you see, right now, even in the Department of History, there's this one niche area which they have started to pick up called oral history. They've never considered oral history important within the department itself. As such, the study provides a vital framework for continued literary and historical inquiry, which can serve to expand our understanding of this fascinating and significant period in Khasi history. See, the Anglo-Khasi War, though documented in numerous shapes and forms by numerous people as well, has these areas that are still untouched, and they constantly remain in the oral form. At Sobar as well, which is one of those areas that felt that conflict, most people do not know about this, and it has remained in the oral form for so long. So I'm one of the few, apart from one more writer who has already contributed, who is able to now further talk about this as well. I've learned from the village council as well through the tourism. There's a small group that focuses on tourism. They have also tried to use some of my materials to promote Sobar as a heritage, village of Meghalaya. But this is still an ongoing process. So by doing this, what is needed is that, while the oral tradition remains, there's also a very high chance that it will eventually vanish, because these storytellers, mostly my informants are elderlies, will pass away. And once they do, that knowledge that they have will also disappear. So by documenting them in the form of an academic paper, which will allow later scholarship to also take place, or a children's literature, it is in itself a form of preserving, but also a form of teaching to perhaps use it for the future. I am sure. Be lucid enough.
Dr. Auswyn, talking to you just for these few minutes, I realized that you have so much in depth in you. And I'm sure that your future is very bright. You should continue to write. You should continue to inspire so many. I'm sure you have already been doing that. You're already in a college dealing with children. So all the very best to you.
Thank you so much.
And I mean, we can only wish you tons and tons of good luck. May you continue to write and continue to empower and continue to preserve, as you said, the society from its past and bring it to its prestigious glory. Thank you
so
for
much.
your time.
Thank you so much,
And
Dr. Lakshmi.
so that was, Dr. Auswyn Winter Japang, with whom I had a little bit of conversation. As I said, there's so much that he has to offer, and I'm sure that he will do this in the near future. Wishing him once again good luck. We wind up right now from this beautiful cozy home. And well, we also hope you've enjoyed this conversation with us. Until next time, from the two of us here and the entire team of Doordarshan, it's wishing you goodbye.